On the 28th of May 1946, inside of Landsberg Prison, a notorious and brutal SS guard was brought out into a courtyard where a huge gallows had been constructed, and he made his way up to the stairs onto the wooden platform. He was confronted by an American executioner who would place a black cap over his head and then the noose. But this former SS man had worked inside of Dachau Concentration Camp, the first concentration camp established following the rise of Hitler to power. Dachau would be liberated at the end of the Second World War. The American liberators would find thousands of people who were sick and dying. They heard accounts of torture and execution firsthand from the prisoners. But there were a number of guards who worked at the site, who were captured and then brought to trial. Then a number of these men, including Josef Jarolin, were condemned for their actions. Jarolin was seen as one of the most horrific guards at the camp, but what did he do? And what were the circumstances around his execution? Join us today as we look at the execution of the Hangman of Dachau, and as always, to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Josef Jarolin was born on the 6th of March 1904 in Repoint, and he would during the Second World War become rather senior inside of the SS, and he would become a camp leader inside of one of Dachau's subcamps. But before this he joined the Bavarian State Police at the age of 19 in 1923, and he would then work as an officer for 8 years. But he was then released from the force as he suffered from a bout of severe illness. But on the 1st of May 1933, Jarolin joined the Nazi Party, and he was member number 3,205,438. Many people around this time joined the Nazi Party, and they would be bowled over by the policies of Hitler and the Nazis, and Hitler had promised to restore pride in Germany following the defeat of the First World War. He also promised German people a return to the European stage with regards to politics, and he would also guarantee that they would be fed and would have stable work. This led to a huge influx of people officially joining the Nazi Party, and Hitler would then work to eradicate his enemies in politics. However, Jarolin must have been a huge fan of Hitler, and he would then, 2 years later in March 1935, join the SS, Heinrich Himmler's paramilitary group, who would become infamous for their running of the concentration camps. The SS would become those guards who worked inside of the camps, and at this time Dachau Concentration Camp had been open a number of years. Jarolin underwent SS training, then worked for a year as a guard in Berlin before he then transferred to work at Sachsenhausen Concentration Camp. Many SS guards would work at different camps before they would move to others, and Sachsenhausen was found relatively close to Berlin, and Jarolin must have been sent to his local site. Here thousands of prisoners would never make it out of the camp alive, and thousands would be executed inside, on the gallows, and also on the firing ranges and shooting facilities. It was also seen as a training site for the SS, and many guards, including Josef Jarolin, would start their career at Sachsenhausen, and many of those who trained here would later become high-ranking members of the SS, and it was seen as a training centre for the future concentration camp commandants. But on the 1st of September 1938, Jarolin was then transferred across to Dachau Concentration Camp, and he worked there as a rapport leader, or Rapportführer. It was his job to keep an eye on a number of prisoners, and he would also be in charge of administering beatings and carrying out executions. The prisoners of Dachau were living every day in fear, and they were subjected to torture inside of the standing cells, tiny prison rooms in which inmates were locked standing up in one position for days on end. This was physical and mental torture. They also had to witness hangings on the gallows to strike fear into the hearts. There were also floggings carried out in public, and also pole hangings, and there were around 40,000 prisoners who never made it out of the camp alive. Thousands of prisoners of war from the Red Army would be sent to the camp, and thousands were executed on the firing range near to the site. Jarolin continued to rise throughout the ranks inside of Dachau, and he was promoted in December 1941 to 3rd Protective Custody Camp Leader, and he would report to the custody camp leader, Franz Hoffmann. In this role it was his job to ensure that no prisoners escaped, and along with other guards, he would punish those who tried to do so. There was often collective responsibility for the inmates, who were said to have escaped, but Jarolin would become infamous for his actions during executions. Those who tried to escape would be hanged in the roll call yards to make sure that prisoners saw their actions, and they needed to know what would happen if they also tried to escape. But Jarolin would act as a hangman, and during some executions he became known for his sadistic actions. It was said at his trial, by one witness and former prisoner that Jarolin pushed hanging men, so they swung to and fro, then beat these prisoners with a bullwhip that was twisted and dried hard, on their faces and their backs, in front and on their shoulders. The prisoners were bleeding. They were Germans, foreigners, and all nationalities. This happened throughout his tour of duty from 1942 until 1943, when Jarolin was transferred from there. The former prisoner who described his actions was known as Helmut Opitz, and he would state that Jarolin, whilst prisoners were hanging, would beat them and brutalise them. But then in March 1943, Jarolin was promoted yet again, and he must have been trusted by Heinrich Himmler, as he was made the camp leader or the commandant of the Dachau subcamp found in Munich Allach. Inside of this camp, prisoners would be forced to make engines for BMW that would then be used in aircraft and other vehicles. Jarolin in this would lead a group of guards who were known as a brutal arbitrary regiment, and they would inflict a significant amount of suffering onto the inmates, and presumably slaughter prisoners who were not working hard enough. Death was common at the camp due to poor food supplies, the atrocities of the SS and Jarolin's guards, and there was also a lack of sanitation and hygiene. Because of these final points, disease broke out, and tuberculosis, typhus and scabies caused big problems. But at the end of the Second World War, Josef Jarolin was brought to the Dachau trials, along with 39 other members of the camp's staff. He would be tried with violating the laws and customs of war and in mistreatment of civilians and prisoners of war. He was also said to have been responsible for the conditions of Dachau that caused so much death and slaughter, and a large number of witnesses came forward to testify about his actions. Former prisoners said he often beat prisoners until they were knocked out and lost consciousness in the administration building of the Dachau site. He was also present on the 1st of July 1942, when 12 prisoners were subject to be hanged on poles, and Jarolin ordered the inmates to be hung higher, causing more suffering. He would admit before the trial to some of his actions, and Jarolin claimed he had tied prisoners up and beat them with an ox whip during interrogations. He was also involved, it was discovered, in the executions of 700 Soviet POWs, and that he gave the orders to the execution squads who shot through the victims, and it was discovered he himself had shot between 30 to 40 prisoners. Jarolin also claimed he was involved in the selections of prisoners who were then sent to Camp Dr. Sigmund Rascher, who would then carry out sadistic human experimentation on them. He was also said to have witnessed much of this, and when he got to the subcamp he would administer floggings and hangings from stakes. Because of these actions, on the 13th of December 1945, Josef Jarolin was sentenced to death and was sent to Landsberg Prison to await his execution. His death sentence was then confirmed on the 5th of April 1946, but on the 28th of May 1946, Josef Jarolin was summoned from his prison cell, and he was then led out into the courtyard of Landsberg Prison. He was surrounded by American military policemen and was led towards a huge wooden gallows in the centre of the yard. As he approached the bottom of the steps, Jarolin's identity was confirmed, and a priest remained with him. He was led up the stairs and then handed over to the executioner, who secured his arms and legs together, and he was then shuffled over the trapdoor. The executioner then placed a black cap over his head, and then the noose, and he quickly released the trapdoor, and Jarolin, one of the most evil guards of Dachau, plunged through to his death. Much is known about the crimes of some of the most high-profile German war criminals, and those of the Nuremberg trials, but there is much less told about the crimes of men such as Josef Jarolin, those who each day would inflict suffering and pain onto the prisoners on the front line. He was an ardent Nazi, and for his crimes was brought for his execution, and Jarolin's crimes were endless. He was an executioner, a murderer, a torturer, and a sadist, who would virulently carry out the horrific actions and policies of the SS. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.